my name is Alice at Wonderland Games. I am going to be doing a beginner and advanced movement guide for an intro into actually learning how to speedrun Sly. So there are a lot of people that play with the standard or default grip or something like that I'm sure a lot of y'all have seen. Just something along this general hand movement. I personally find it much easier to play claw, especially when it comes to things like mini games, so I tend to have my index fingers arched over the buttons here, so you can access all of them a little easier, as well as having access to the analog stick and camera at the same time. I personally find that a lot easier in regards to several different tricks that will be coming up on top of mini games like Burning Rubber. It's just easier to be able to control the camera as well as use your buttons at the same time, so I would personally recommend picking up this game claw unless it feels uncomfortable to you. It depends on the trick that you're doing though. You'll see that I have several different hand positions depending on the trick in order to make the actual movement the comfiest that I can, as well as the most reliable that I can. So, other little things. There are just a couple of things that I feel like a lot of people don't fully access when playing this game that could in general really help you. So one of the first one is R3 to set the camera. Sly's position on here is obviously not dependent on the camera, but that being said, if you tap R3, which is click down the stick, it will change the camera position to the direction that Sly is facing. This is what we mean whenever we say use R3 to set the camera, or anything along those lines. In general, it's not used a ton. It's usually used whatever camera angle you're most comfortable with, except there are some tricks that are precise enough that you want to set the camera angle beforehand, just to make sure that you actually have the correct camera angle, especially when doing things like D-pad movement. D-pad movement is another really unique piece of this game. That being said, you can use the analog stick, and in general, it's much better to use the analog stick, but for precise movement, precise setups, those kinds of things, the D-pad is always very true to the cardinal directions, and that being said, that can be used to set up a lot of more difficult proxies, more difficult specific setups, those kinds of things. So those are just two pieces of just controller tech that I feel like are underutilized in this game in general. Another really important aspect of this game is the different types of jumps. There's controlled jumps and or normal jumps, and I normally call normal jumps lurch jumps because they feel a lot more drastic in their movement. So, controlled jumps are if you tap and then move. You see you can move Sly in very slight angles, very slight movement. It helps you set up more precise tricks. It helps you get in really specific locations. Lurch jumps are if you move and tap X at the same time. You see that there is a specific minimum set distance that he goes, so even that I'm only tapping the direction, he is jumping much further. Take that in mind if you're trying to get very specific positioning. You want to be tapping X and then moving the analog stick, because then he doesn't go a set minimum distance. He will just barely move according to your analog stick taps. Whereas if you try to move and jump at the same time, he jumps much further, despite the fact that I'm only tapping the movement, just as I was earlier. It's important to take in mind that Sly is actually faster running on the ground than he is in the air. So, when you're trying to do casual sections of a level like this, you want to be trying to run as much as possible and try to minimize jumping in order to optimize your time. One good example is these water wheels here. It's actually fastest to run across them like that, as opposed to trying to jump across each one of them. It's just something important to take in mind as you're trying to optimize sections and get your time down. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about in this game is loads. As you can see, whenever you do load the game, you have a moment during the fade out where you can control Sly, you can move around, you can actually do several things during this, including grab keys, which we'll get to later. But it's important to note that anything that you do after you press the load button is counted as done after the load. So you can do things during the fade out that will be counted after you finish loading. One really helpful application of loads is that if you do end up, say for instance, losing a charm, then you can load the game and get the charm back, just as if you had never lost it. However, it's important to note once again that anything that happens during the fade out is considered done after the load. So if I say, for instance, take damage, load the game because I took damage, but the charm pops up after I hit the load button, then I don't have the charm after the fade out. This is another major application of loads. There's actually a cutscene trigger right here, and we can't really get around it. However, whenever you view the first frame of a cutscene, it actually counts as having viewed the entire cutscene. So what you can do is you can run into it, load the game, and then that counts as the cutscenes already having been viewed. So then we can just run through it like normal. That saves a lot of time when we're actually viewing the cutscene in most instances. Important cautionary note, if you are loading out of cutscenes, like this, it's important to note that whenever you're going to load into a new run file, you need to make sure that you load the same file twice, just to make sure that any cutscenes that you may have loaded are back intact before you load a run file, because you really don't want to load an already watched cutscene onto a run file, because that makes your run invalid on speedrun.com. So just be really careful about that, that whenever you're practicing tricks or anything like that, if you're about to go into a new run, double load your file. Then the cutscene is back intact, and you don't have to worry about that during an actual run. Now let's talk about key grabs. The very first instant that Sly's cane touches the key and the key itself, then it will save the game as having had the key grabbed. It has a very long animation to it, as I will show here. However, for most keys in the game, we can actually skip that key grabbing animation. This is also known as a key grab, and you can do it using two major methods. You can either grab the key and hit exit level, or grab the key and load. Now, exit level is going to generally be faster, and I will show the exit level method here. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to swing the cane, and then right before Sly's cane impacts the glass, you're going to pause, and then exit level. It's kind of a quick rhythm, so you need to get used to this, but it will look something like this. Now, you may remember that I said that you could also do key grabs by loading level. Now, why would you want to do this if exit level is generally faster? There is one major use for this, and that's to get your charms back if you either need them for an upcoming trick or you want them for safety purposes. I'm going to show you what grabbing the key with load level looks like. I'm going to go ahead and lose these two charms and then come back here, and we'll get both the charms back and the key. So what you're going to do with the load key method is that you're going to actually load the game before you swing, because recall, whenever you do something after you press the load button, anything that happens during the fade out counts as done after the load. And it's important to note that whenever Sly's cane touches the key, the very instant that it touches the key, it saves the game. If it saves the game as you not having the charms anymore, then you won't be able to get them back. That's why we load first, rather than after grabbing the key like the exit level method. We're going to load the game, then swing during the fade out to grab the key. And now we have both of our charms back, and we have the key for the level. Now, one very important thing to note about the keys in the glass cases like this is that Sly's feet have to be on the ground for the game to register the key as having been picked up. So when these glass cases are protecting the key, it's much safer to swing horizontally from the ground than it is to jump and swing from the air, because there's a chance that Sly's feet may not touch the ground before the game actually finishes the load. As so. I am going to show one more example of a quote-unquote key grab on Raleigh. The last hit on any boss actually functions as basically a key, so what you can do, square pause, just like normal, and then you can menu out of the fight. This is really important on boss fights because this allows you to get out of the ending cutscene, and the ending cutscene is generally very long, so that time save on ending cutscenes is super helpful to have, and skipping the actual cutscene and just key pausing out of it. So here we are at Panda King. This is another really good example of where you can key pause on a boss. However, I wanted to mention this one in particular because unlike Raleigh, it is way easier to be in the air when you key pause. So I'm going to give you an example. What we're going to do is instead of the normal square pause, we are going to jump, square pause, and then we're going to map out of the level as we did with Raleigh. There we go. Okay, so let's get into slope jumps. Slope jumps are in any surface that is sloped away from you, like this here. You can actually get much more height than originally intended. You can see how my normal double jumps here don't really do much, right? I'm double jumping against this the best I can, but if you continue to hold up against the slope, and then it's really important that you extend your double jumps as much as possible, so you're not going to be doing double jumps like that, which is the normal way that people tend to tap it. What you want to be doing is you want to be holding that first jump and then second jump. So what you're going to do is you're going to go jump, jump, like that. This is a really good wall to practice slope jumps against, because if you're not doing the slope jump properly, then you're not really going to get it. But in general, if you don't fully understand or you can't get slope jumps very reliable, you can actually just spam as long as you're holding up on the slope. As long as you're holding up, you can keep trying it. There's no repercussions. Just make sure, the biggest tip is to make sure to try to extend those jumps as much as possible. So, you can see what I'm doing is I am jump, jump. I'm not using my double jump until I'm basically at the very top of the thing. So, this is the best wall to practice slope jumping against, and this is one that you actually do see in the run, so it's very important to be able to get this one down, but it's not that hard of a slope jump, so it's a good beginner practice spot. Now I want to talk about Hoagie Hops, named after our very Hoagie Pops. Whenever you jump on a trampoline or a mattress or anything like that, if you actually time your jump, so you jump right when you hit the trampoline, then you gain better control of Sly in the air. And that can allow you to get several places where you're not fully intended. I use it here, for instance, skipping mattresses. It's much easier there when you have better control of Sly, Hoagie hopping off of the mattress. There are a couple places where you have to Hoagie hop in order to actually get to that location, but they're generally backup strategies. I will show you one right here. Right here is probably one of the most useful instances of a Hoagie hop. You cannot make it to that platform over there, just jumping off of this trampoline like normal. However, if you tap X right when you land on the trampoline, i.e. Hoagie hop, then you can gain better control of Sly and just a little more distance over there to make this jump possible. Now, there is a really unique tech that you can do that is most applicable to these brambles in World 3. Normally, these brambles take 3 hits to break. 1, 2, 3. However, that takes a bit of time, so there is a way that you can actually speed it up. You can make one square swing count for multiple if you tap up on the D-pad multiple times while you're swinging. So for instance, let me show you here. See, that was 2. Let me reload and get a better angle here. There's 2. It's possible to get 3, but it's closer to a 1-frame trick. There we go. So you can see how much faster that is than taking the 3 swings to break the bramble. There are a lot of brambles in World 3, so you can save a good few seconds over that time. There are a few other places where double hitting is actually super applicable. Let me demonstrate. So here is the other major application of double hits. This can save you a lot of time. First, I'm going to do the normal spam square section for clockwork, and you can see how long it actually takes to get his health down to 0. Now, let me show you again with double hits. This is how much faster it is to use double hits to finish off clockwork. You can see from the controller on the hand cam that all I'm doing is actually spamming up on the D-pad in square, both simultaneously to try to get as many hits as possible in per square input. And you can see as shown here. So that's a much faster method to actually finish taking out Clockwork.
It took some
On the
tricky
brambles
maneuvering,
themselves,
but I managed to
you don't
snatch
need
that last
to
piece of the Thievius
spam
Raccoonus
as
from
much. You
Clockwork's
can
claw.
just tap a couple
I had
times
taken down
because you're
each
certain to
member
get
of
at
the
least one
fiendish
double
five.
hit in there.
Raleigh,
There is actually a fun
Mugshot,
fact. With
Liz Ruby,
16
Panda King,
frame-perfect
and
inputs, it is
finally
possible to
Clockwork.
destroy Clockwork's
I've
head
beaten
in
them all
one
one by
swing.
one and
But that's not
reclaimed my
RTA viable,
birthright.
so we go with the massing method because
Of
that is
course,
an
there was
easy
no way I could
RTA
have gotten
viable
here
way
without the
in
help
order
of
to
my
get
pals.
Clockwork's health down as fast as
I
possible.
know this hasn't been easy.
Here we are at Lair of the Beast. This is the Lair of the Beast out of bounds, and this is where I would consider to be the best place to practice cane jumping for beginners. Now, a cane jump is really interesting. You see, when you jump off of something and then reattach to it, there is a moment in which Sly is considered reattached to the object, but his body is not actually grabbed onto it. I'm going to be quiet for a second, and I'm going to jump on and then reattach, just so you can hear the actual audio cue. You can hear when the bone clicks. That's when Sly is actually considered reattached to the object, even though he's clearly not actually grabbing onto the object. But what that means is that as soon as Sly is considered reattached to the object, you can jump again off of that and extend your jumps much further than were originally intended. So what you're going to do is you're going to jump, circle onto the object. Once you hear the click, then you're going to double jump away from it again. Like that. One more time. Just like that. There are some much more precise cane jumps, such as Sinking Peril, in which you kind of need to know the timing rather than waiting for the audio cue, just so you can get the perfect cane jump. But here's one of the best places to practice. If you're getting ledge grabs like that, then you're probably waiting to jump after re-grabbing on for too long. So what you're looking for is you're trying to jump immediately upon hearing the audio cue, so you get the furthest distance you possibly can. If you get all the way over to this wall without ledge grabbing it, then you know that you're actually timing your cane jumps well. Practice here, and you'll get them down in no time. So I want to do one more useful example of cane jumping. However, this is hook jumping. It's very similar, but what you're going to do is you're going to swing to the top of the actual hook. You're going to jump off like with a cane jump, and then you are going to hook back on, and then double jump again. So I'm going to do that one more time. We're going to swing, we're going to jump, circle back onto it, and then we're going to jump off of it again. Just like that. And that is a hook jump. They're very similar to cane jumps, and they have similar timings, but they're just slightly different with the swinging animation. So a side effect of cane jumping is called displacement. It's called that because after you cane jump off of something and then circle onto a standable object, then it actually miscalculates where Sly is supposed to be standing and it displaces his model accordingly. This is due to not actually letting the cane jump finish, grabbing onto the whatever circled item that you were grabbing onto. I've re-grabbed this item. You can see that if I re-grab a grabbable item and then go back onto this, it fixes your rail slide. That's important because if you're trying to do kind of longer latches onto rail slidable items or things like that, such as DSJ or snake jump, then sometimes displacement can actually ruin your momentum and cause you to go straight through the rail. So, grabbing onto one grabbable object is one easy way to reset your displacement, on top of ledge grabbing is another really easy way to reset your displacement, and I will demonstrate that reset it here. In general, displacement is not going to be useful in a run setting, but there is one major use in one category so far in Hundo Coinless, which I'll show off here. This is a really good example of where displacement can actually be used in your favor. I can displace myself off the rail there, and I don't have to collect any of those coins. In general, for any major category, displacement is not going to be useful, and you won't need to concern yourself with it, except for the fact that it may cause you to miss some jumps. So I wouldn't put too much work into trying to learn how to control it or how to use it, other than just the fact that it's there and that it exists. Now let's talk about Superjumps. It's impossible to talk about Superjumps without talking about how the way the game handles grounding position. Now, grounding position is pretty simple in its concept. Whenever Sly is found in a falling position, whether he's taken damage from, say for instance, water, from falling over an edge, or he could also have just gotten stuck in an infinitely falling loop, like right over here, it will return Sly to his last known grounded position. However, it's important to note that we can manipulate this grounded position with Superjumps. Note that I will actually have Sly return right here, rather than next to over the ledge when I go over the ledge right now. That's called a super jump. Now, why is a super jump helpful? A super jump is helpful because when Sly is returning from a falling position to his last grounded state, his hitbox is actually active, so you can clip through things like loading triggers earlier than you're actually supposed to be able to. I personally recommend just practicing super jumps to start. There's a really clear visual cue as to when you've gotten one and when you haven't. If you jump and you see Sly have a little dust cloud below his feet, you see that? That means that the game has registered you as grounded and that you failed the super jump somewhere. So I would just personally recommend practicing super jumps before you actually try to chain them together in order to get Sly's hitbox to cut through things. Here's how you actually perform a super jump. What you're going to be wanting to do is you want to be in the air, you want to swing the cane before you land, and then jump right before Sly's feet touch the ground. So it'll look like this. There are a couple different methods to actually do super jumps. Some people prefer using just the one thumb. Some people will rock that thumb from square to X, like this. Or, my personal favorite method is I actually use the claw, as we discussed earlier, and I do something like this. Go ahead and practice just trying to super jump around, making sure you don't miss any, and that will make it much easier when you actually try to string super jumps to specific locations. As long as you can get chains like this, just hopping around, then you shouldn't have any problem getting them in actual runs. Here's an example of one of the first super jumps that you'll learn in order to actually apply it into a run setting. If you start behind this cannon here, this is called Raleigh super jump. What you're going to do is you're going to super jump around this corner, and then you're going to super jump all the way over to those barrels that we saw earlier, and you're going to get yourself stuck right in here. As you can see, Sly's hitbox was still active the entire time that he was being returned to his last known state, and we clipped through the cannon, despite the fact that the cannon is not actually unlocked. Okay, now let's discuss a couple things that can make your super jumps a little easier. Here we are at Mugshot Super Jump, which is notoriously one of the hardest super jumps to pick up for beginners. It's important to note that there is actually a cutscene right in front of Mugshot's face where you would normally enter the boss fight, and that will become important in just a second. For now, we're going to actually do the super jump. I'm sure a lot of y'all will become familiar with, or are already familiar with as beginners, that you can frequently get a ledge grab on a super jump. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it can make the super jump much harder to control and really cuts your momentum, like this. You can actually reset your momentum and get full momentum and control of your super jump in a couple different ways. One major way is actually using cutscene ground, like we just discussed here. There is a cutscene, so if I stand here, the game will not count me as grounded, and then I have full control of my super jump again. So I will demonstrate that it did not drop the super jump by going and finishing the super jump, and we still get put in the boss fight. So here's another way to reset your momentum. You'll see that this file is actually one with abilities, so you want to make sure that you have roll equipped, and therefore this is only a viable way to reset your momentum on categories where you do get abilities and get the vaults. What you're going to do is you're going to simply do your super jump like normal. You're going to tap roll in the air, just one little tap on triangle, and then it's going to reset your momentum entirely, like so. There we go. And then I can once again demonstrate by finishing the super jump that we did not drop the super jump, as so. Okay, now we can get into Void Drowns. Void Drowns are technically just a logical extension of super jumping. So you're going to do a normal super jump, as you've already learned. However, the ending point is going to be very different. Now, Void Drowns were found recently, and they were actually what made World 4 skip viable. So in order to actually skip World 4, we need to get into this statue of Panda King over here. And you may be asking yourself, how are you going to do that with a super jump, considering we just found that you need a specific beginning and end location for a super jump? And that's where the Void Drown comes in handy. Normally, when I start here, and then super jump down here, you would expect me to stand on the same place that I just started the super jump in, as we've just explained. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to jump into the water, as the game normally intends, and then you're going to see that return me to the same place as you've seen super jumps work in the past. However, a Void Drown allows us to get much more excessive speed than the game originally intended. You can see that I'm doing the super jump from out of bounds, and that's actually for a very good reason. Right here is the edge of the water plane, and here is the edge of nothing. Now, normally when you hit a water plane, you take the damage, you float there, and you're stopped from falling, and then you return to your last known grounded position. However, if we can take damage from the water plane, and then fall into the void, there's nothing stopping us from falling for as long as Sly's injured animation takes. That's exactly what's going to gain us much more speed than the game intended, from returning from down somewhere in the void, all the way over to the starting position that you saw over here, and that's going to act as a slingshot that allows us to get the momentum all the way into Panda King's lair, all the way over there. Okay, I will demonstrate this Void Drown here. It's important to know that you'll never have to ad-lib a Void Drown. Void Drowns are kind of finicky, so they tend to have very well tested and thought out setups. So you'll learn the setups as we know the best way for them now. This one involves starting where you just saw, and then jumping from here with a specific D-pad setup in order to clip the water plane. You see we fall much further than the game originally intended, and that gives us way more speed, and slingshots us where the game didn't think we could get before. And that's how you skip World 4. Minor optimization note, whenever you do fall and take damage, whether it be in a pit or into water, you can actually press the X button to pop out of the injured animation more quickly, and you can either use that to time specific inputs, such as you would in a Void Drown, or you can just gain control of Sly more quickly to get your run back on track. Now we can talk about one of the game's more hidden mechanics. This is called momentum preservation. So, we actually found out that while Sly is in the air, the game is trying to force him down to a max capped speed while airborne. The way that the game does this is for about 18 frames after the initial jump, what it's checking for is that you've either finished pressing the jump button, or finished pressing a direction, or one of the two. And then if either of those is true, then it will cap Sly's speed, because the game recognizes that you're in the air, or possibly in the air, and will slow you down. Now, what this means for a speedrun perspective is that if you want to be going as fast as possible, or you want to be maintaining max speed during proxies, then what you want to do is you want to make sure that your max speed is uncapped while in the air. And there's actually a really easy way to do that. As you might have heard before, as long as you were holding down X during those 18 frames, then the game will not recognize that the speed needs to be capped, and then you can actually uncap your speed in the air. The easiest way to do this is whenever you see Sly's double jump animation, he does a little flip in the air. Once his flip is finished, is actually 18 frames from the start of it, and that means that all you need to do is hold down jump during the flip, and you're good. Once momentum preservation is actually activated, then until you're in the air again, it will not recheck for whether or not it needs to cap, so you're good. Now this is a trick called Cletus. I'm going to set up the proxy spot like normal, however I'm going to hold jump as I'm getting into the proxy spot in order to make sure that my momentum preservation is set to be uncapped, and that will make sure that I get the maximum speed out of the proxy as possible. And there you go. That's how you do a Cletus. Now, doing the opposite, as in canceling your momentum, is pretty simple. When you're already in the air, all you're going to do is you're going to press square to swing your cane. That will swing your cane downwards, and it will cause Sly to fall directly down from where you swung the cane in the air. So here we are at a Raleigh statue in ASA, a stealthy approach. This is the best place for you to practice boost jumping because it is not actually possible to make it to this ledge up here without doing the boost jump correctly. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be boost jumping off of this statue and up onto that ledge to get onto the cliffs above here. This is one of the fastest strats that you can pick up for a beginner in ASA. Boost jumping actually uses a really interesting mechanic of super jumping off of a ledge grab. So in general, we talked earlier about trying to cancel our lack of momentum during this exact animation and super jumping slow, but this animation of super jumping slowly with the lack of forward momentum is actually a higher distance than super jumping would normally be. We're purposely going to ledge grab and then super jump here in order to get a higher jump than we would normally because we don't need the distance, we need the height. So, from a ledge grab on the statue, what we're going to do is we are going to jump and then super jump on the opposite corner of the statue towards that ledge over there. However, rather than super jump and then jump like normal, we are going to super jump, pause. And it should be right on the edge of the statue. And then what we're going to do out of the pause menu is press X 3 times. Once for return to game, and then 2 more will actually register as jumps. So it's going to be a double jump, and then wait a little bit, and then 1 final jump. So 3 times, tap, 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 tap. And that should be your general rhythm of getting out of here. Of course, I am going to mess up. There we go. Second try works. Boost jumping isn't that bad, except the rhythm out of the pause menu is really important, so make sure to focus on that the best that you can. Make sure that you are doing it from a ledge grab, and make sure that you're hitting the very edge of what you want to be jumping off of. You should be able to make it there with some practice every time. So, the reason this works is you see how a pause is used in between here? That pause is not strictly necessary, however this pause is what makes the trick RTA viable. Because what the pause is doing is it is pause buffering an X input directly out of the pause menu. If you notice, what's actually happening here is we are going to tap X 3 times. Once is return game. 2 of those are jump. However, we still have a double jump after that. So what we're actually doing is we're grabbing 3 jumps off of this pause because we're frame buffering, or we're actually grabbing 3 jumps out of this pause because we're pause buffering a frame perfect input out of it to get an extra jump that wasn't intended. And that's exactly why it's a boost jump. That, combined with the extra height from the super jump off of a ledge grab, means that we can get all the way up to that ledge despite its very not unintended state. Okay, so now for my personal favorite trick in the game. I'm very excited to show you all this one. This is roll hovering. This was actually found specifically for coinless hundo, because of course it was, but what you're going to need is you need the ability roll, as you can see that I'm on. That being said, because this is based off of the ability roll, it's only useful in things like all vaults and 100% or 100% coinless, which you should definitely run. I'm getting instant karma for that, because a piece of pretzel just went down the wrong section. So, what's important to understand about roll hover is you see whenever Sly is on a spire, or he jumps to a spire, he jumps, circle, and when you see he circles to a spire, he actually gains extra height. It's jump, circle, and then falls all the way down and lands. However, you can use the roll to cancel his landing animation. So what that means is that if you cancel the landing animation and re-circle to the spire, you go up again. cancel the landing animation, recircle, you go up again. And you can see where this is going. You can gain infinite height with this trick. However, it's important that you have a spire or another circleable object below you that Sly stands on. So you cannot do it with things like pipes, and you can't do it with things like ladders. You have to do it with things that Sly stands on or are circleable to. But if you have that criteria and you have roll, then you can do this magical trick. Now you see the actual rhythm that I'm going here. This is very important to maintain this exact rhythm. If you try to push it faster, then you will drop inputs, and if you try to push it slower, you'll end up dropping speed. So you see the rhythm that I'm going with here. This is exactly what you want to be doing. I find it easiest to slide my thumb across circle to triangle, and make sure that you're doing circle to triangle and not any other way. But slide your thumb across circle to triangle, and then just keep this exact rhythm, and that's all you need to do. If you are going to fall out of this, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you landed on triangle, because if you stop this chain on circle, you're going to drop straight down. But if you stop this chain on triangle, then you're actually going to have air control out of it, so you can go forward and land on things further away. Just like that. You see we landed here, from there. In general, this trick is not the most useful in terms of speed, because it takes a lot of time to gain height, and you see the distance that I actually fell. However, it's possible to do this trick with multiple spires in a row, or things like vines, to maintain the momentum as you roll hover, and I can show that right here. Oh, this is a really good place to actually practice. Something important to note is that if you're holding forward while actually doing the hover, you're going to end up losing height. So what you want to be doing is holding forward, let go of the directional pad, hover a couple times, hold forward, and then continue to hover. So you should be alternating forward and hovering rather than both at the same time. So, the last interesting mechanic that I want to explain for now is Binocucom double pausing, Binoc double pause, or double pause, anything along those lines. It follows several names. But exactly what I'm describing is if you were to pull up the Binocucom and pause right before the Binocucom is actually pulled up, you'll see there that there is just a little pause menu that shrank behind the Binocucom, but the Binocucom canceled it. However, I can still pause again. What that allows us to do is have two pause menus open at the same time, and this allows us to do really weird things with transferring states, such as keys, percentages, and charms, over to files that are not supposed to have those. Let me show you my current save files. We have this one at 100% on Prowling the Grounds, and then we have a 1% file at 2 to Tango. This means that it shouldn't have any keys, any abilities, or anything along those lines. However, what we're going to do is we're going to use the Binoc double pause to transfer all of our keys and abilities over to this 1% file. What we're going to do is we're going to open a Binocucom, pause right before it opens, and then pause again over the Binocucom. Something important to note about the Binoc double pause is that the first file that you load loads the area, as in location, and the second file loads the state. So for instance, if we're loading 2 to Tango with the 100% file, we load 2 to Tango and then 100% file. If we are loading Prowling the Grounds with a 1% file, we load Prowling the Grounds and then the 1% file. So it's always location first and then state. And that's important to keep in mind when you're trying to set up a Binoc double pause. So what we're going to do here is we are going to load the first area, close the Binocucom with our 1, and then select the second file and load the second one. So it's going to look just like this. Now, as you can see, we are in 2 to Tango. However, we are on a 100% file. My file that was in 2 to Tango was only 1%. However, we now have all of the abilities. We have the Master Thief sprints unlocked. So this file that was on 2 to Tango, that was originally on 1%, now carries all of the same things that the file that was on 100% carries. Alright, that should be more than enough information to get you started. If you have any questions, I'm sure that myself or any one of the runners would love to help you. I wish you the absolute best of luck in learning the game. It is a wonderful game and a wonderful speedrun, and hope to see you on the leaderboard soon.